Today I wanted to compare my new Potentate book with the Paul Rubens that I have been using for a while now. I really like the Paul Rubens paper and the cute little book. I have the 3x5 here, and I also have the slightly larger size of the Paul Rubens, and this is one of my favorite papers to paint in. So I found it interesting that Lightwish on Amazon, who sells my Paul Rubens book, has started selling this new one called Potentate. I think that's how you pronounce it. We're going with that. I thought it would be interesting to compare why they made another similar book when Paul Rubens is like the same price for pretty much the same thing. I'll put it in the pinned comment if you want to have a look. This is the 100% cotton press. 100% cotton hot press version in 3x5. There seems to be more, I was going to say noise, that's a photography term. There seems to be more granulation, this texture thing, on the new Potentate paper. It's subtle, but it's there. Do you see it? I tried to wet the paper thoroughly on both the Potentate and the Paul Rubens, and then swatch the same on both. These are rosas. You can see how I did that here and judge for yourself if it's the same. I also painted the same thing twice. I actually painted it 3 times, but the first time the paints weren't activated. So once the paints were really wet, I painted the same thing really quickly on both. Both papers do the wet on wet whooshing thing really well. I enjoyed painting on both of them. They're both good paper. I wouldn't be surprised to learn it's the same paper. I was thinking the colors were a little less vibrant and had faded a little bit on the new paper, but I think that was my swatching technique. In the later landscape that I painted on the Potentate book, the sky is just as vibrant as the Paul Rubens. The paper itself is wider on the Potentate, but it's the same size the other way. It feels slightly larger when painting. That may be because I am painting landscapes. The overall book size is wider on the Potentate and bigger the other way on the Paul Rubens. So if you have a travel bag that fits your Paul Rubens just barely, you might check the dimensions before getting the Potentate book instead. Both have stitched-in pages, which is good. The front cover on the Paul Rubens is this leather-like texture that feels more sturdy. The pages are set back a bit in the Paul Rubens, so the edges of your paper are probably more protected in that one for travel. But the Potentate cover is a good hardcover. It's sturdy chipboard. It has this marble-like texture that catches the light, and it's kind of pearly and raised slightly, so it feels cool. The Paul Rubens has this leather-like texture to the front cover, and feels like it protects the paper, but okay, whatever. We said that already. The band comes off completely, which could be a pro or a con. Because it's white, I got paint on it, trying to use it to keep the book open, like I usually do. But I realize now I could have just put the band on the other side I wasn't painting on, and used the clothespin on this side. It's got an interesting fabric-covered binding on the outside. I can see that getting dirty faster, and overall a white book getting dirty faster, but it's also really pretty. I just tend to gravitate towards the black cover books. Maybe it's a photographer thing, liking black, I don't know. There's also no bookmark thing. I don't use one anyway, and sometimes remove them, so that doesn't bother me. There's also no back pocket. Just something to note if that's important to you. I think if I were to shove one down in a bag for travel, the Paul Rubens would hold up better since the cover protects the edges of the paper better. But the Potentate would fit better in a narrower bag. The Paul Rubens would probably fit better in a shorter bag, but just slightly. Unless your travel bag is a tight fit, either one should be just fine. I really like the slightly wider paper size. With smaller paper, just a little bit wider feels like a good difference. And the paper itself, I'm happy to report, is good cotton paper. I was worried with no reviews it might not be good, but I wanted to try it out for myself, and I'm glad I did. I'm excited to paint more in this, but it does feel like they cut corners everywhere they could. The band holding it closed isn't attached. The paper isn't perforated. There's no bookmark or back pocket. The binding on the outside isn't covered, and the pages aren't protected by the cover like the Paul Rubens. The cover on the Paul Rubens extends past the pages a bit and protects them more. Overall, it's good paper, but isn't worth paying more for than the Paul Rubens. If I were giving someone a gift of one of these books, I'd go with the Paul Rubens. But if that's not available, the Potentate would be good paper, like the Paul Rubens that I love painting with. Hello, future me here. I have now painted more things that I wanted to show you on the book. I did some wet on dry swatching. The other swatching was wet on wet, so you can see how that looks on both books. I also painted a bright and colorful sunset and an ocean scene on the Potentate. These are my initial impressions of the Potentate paper and how I think it compares to the Paul Rubens book I love painting in. I'm happy with the paper, but the packaging leaves something to be desired, especially compared to the Paul Rubens book, which has it all together. I'm going to keep it by my bed, the Potentate, for painting in, but it's probably not going to travel anywhere with me. I would worry about the sturdiness of the cover long term if I shoved it in a bag. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Let me know if you try this book and what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.